So Dwight, this one on today was kind of your concept of how to take the respawn mechanics from a lot of video games and how to adapt it back to D&D, where death, you just respawn through some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, so let's just cover two things really quick. So, death in D&D is really never ever final. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the Marvel cinematic or the DC cinematic universe, right? Just because you die doesn't mean you're dead.
Minus a handful of exceptions, you can always come back.
Right, and so there's spells, there's magic, there's abilities. I mean, you could even do like a Deus Ex Machina thing and make a god come and revive them if you need to. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to talk about a different way of going with it entirely. So let's say that you accidentally total party kill your entire group of players. Like, they're just rolling horrible that night and literally everybody dies. And you're sitting there going, I don't really want them to have to roll up new characters. We were in the middle of everything. What do we do? At that point, what you do is simply this. I think this is kind of the coolest concept. And in a lot of ways, it's also respawning in a video game, or if you just watch the most recent Rick and Morty episode, season 5, episode 2, where I'm not going to go into that per se, but what I'm going to say is like the first scene opens up and the entire family is wiped out. And then the next scene, there's another family. And then they kind of explain why that is. So you could do a very similar thing, and there's a lot of like Star Trek episodes the same way. The Enterprise goes flying in, especially the Next Generation. They go flying in, and the next thing you know, the entire ship blows up, and it's like commercial break, and we're 15 minutes in. And you're like, what in the world's going on? And then they fast forward back, really rewind, 3 days, and now you're seeing the story 3 days ago, which you never saw, and then they get to that same pivotal moment, and now they have to make a decision. And the decision, could kill them like it did the last time or not, and they're stuck in some sort of time loop thing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways you could do this, where you could have a situation where you do have like a Deus Ex Machina, a god sitting there going, I really need this to happen. And so when you guys had messed up and totally party killed yourself, you literally could end that night with, and then you guys all wake up in a tavern with strange memories of what just occurred.
Yeah.
But you guys realize that you were in this tavern 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're going to end it for tonight. And in reality, what you've done is like the god needs them to get through this mission. And so that god has decided to move time backward to allow you to get it again and give you some sort of pointers. And then if you were running it through again, literally as they're going through, it's the exact same thing. And maybe it was something dumb. Like, they all fell into this weird pit trap, and then, like, you just had them just get rained down with rocks and arrows from almost nobody NPCs from above because they got dumb. Perfect. Just run through the whole thing as they're going through it again. They get to that certain spot, and, if they didn't somehow remember this was the room where they all died, before they walk in, you're like, okay, everybody give me some sort of intelligence check, some sort of wisdom check, some sort of check for them to realize, you remember this room. This is the room where you died, and there's a pit like 14 feet up in front of you right now.
The other thing it allows you to do as well, is there's a whole entire genre called roguelike games.
Okay.
Roguelike. Basically, the whole entire concept is death's part of the progression.
Oh, right.
So now instead of it being you're trying to avoid death,
right,
you know that death's an inevitability. So you could actually play a Tomb of Horrors like dungeon to its fullest extent, because now in order for you to pass, you have to die.
Well, that would be an interesting thing, right? Where you actually have it so that certain things. So there's a couple of games where they have it where the first time you play through, that happens, and then they reset the game. But all the stuff you were doing in the first time still happens. But then you get to play through again. And if you move people, it'll try to figure out what would have happened had you done that.
And D&D actually has a great thing for that, because there was that spell book when we were creating the wizard character in our book that allowed you to just have clones.
Yeah.
So you could have all of your...
It's a little expensive to have clones. It's a little expensive,
but there's an actual mechanic in there that you could have and play a roguelike game in D&D.
Right, where your characters are high enough level that their clones have to go do something, and in progression of doing it, they're supposed to die.
Or...
because,
Deus Ex Machina, your god just created these artifacts just to have another vat of clones do its bidding.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. Like, you guys wake up in the cloning facility after. If you're doing like more of a sci-fi game, that could be a really fun little like hook or something. Anyway, there's a couple ways you can handle it. You could have like time go backwards because of a god. You could do some sort of magical or sci-fi cloning techniques with it. And then your players could find out that maybe they're not really who they think they are, which would be all sorts of interestingness for story. The other thing that you can have with it, obviously, is the idea that in order for them to get through certain parts of the dungeon or certain things of this area, like maybe they've walked into a magical plane, and that plane is literally, they're locked in that plane, and in that plane they can't die. They just restart. But the actions that they've done is still happen. So if they walk into this room, everyone's still dead that they left dead.
Yeah.
And they just got to keep repeating everything until they can finally get it, and maybe even to the extent where they have to set up certain parts of themselves to hold things open, even though that means they die, for their next self to run in as fast as they can to basically get there so that their previous self didn't die in vain.
Yeah.
So anyway, a lot of fun things you can do with this concept, and we'll see you next time.